2, a bunch of young women, and 3, a bunch of female athletes. So that's super cool. A lot of this space that I'm kind of in now is very dominated by old men. So it's super cool to be with young girls. That makes me very happy. Really, it's like revitalizing. I figured I'll just very briefly introduce myself. My name is Riley. I was a college athlete. I was a swimmer. You guys don't have a swim team, do you? No. Yeah. Oh my gosh. I was a swimmer. Played a lot of sports growing up, but ultimately stuck with swimming. Went to University of Kentucky, where I had really a phenomenal experience. I loved UK. Actually, my first ever school record I broke was at Mizzou, so that's kind of cool here in Missouri. Yeah. So lots of good memories in the state of Missouri. But I had a pretty illustrious career. Very proudly finished my career as a 12-time All-American, 5-time SEC champion. Actually, still the SEC record holder in the 200 butterfly. Making me one of the fastest Americans of all time. Also means I have really big, manly shoulders. But just had really accomplished a lot of great things. And so I'll kind of flash forward. My junior year, I ended up placing 7th in the country, which I was proud of. It's a pretty high honor. You're top 8, you're an All-American. But I knew right then and there that I placed 7th my junior year, that my senior year, I wanted to win a national title. But of course, this was all impeded upon when the NCAA announced that a male by the name of Leah Thomas, who is formerly Will Thomas, who swam 3 years on the men's team at University of Pennsylvania before deciding to switch to the women's team, would be allowed to compete against the girls. And so ultimately, after the firsthand experience that I had competing against this male, changing in the locker room with this male, on top of just the silencing and the tactics that our universities use to really keep us quiet and submissive, I really felt like I could no longer go along with it like they were wanting us to, like they were essentially forcing us to. And so that's kind of the short of how I got here. Are most of y'all, how many of you guys are upperclassmen? Majority, yeah. Cool. And are most of you from Missouri?
No.
Where are you from?
I live in Indiana.
Oh, nice.
Question.
Yeah.
Okay, so how did you navigate your response to Leah and the media in a Christ-like way while still being, of course, upset over what happened? Because I think that's a very difficult thing to navigate while trying to show Christ at the same time.
It was really hard. It really was. First and foremost, I think I had a skewed kind of perception and understanding of what respect was. Because we'd been told for so long, okay, well, if you don't do this, then you're not being respectful. And if you don't adhere to preferred pronouns, you're not being kind, you're not being compassionate. And so I really struggled, and I'll be totally honest, at first, I kind of did fall into all of that. And I kind of went along with it for a bit, and I noticed every single time I spoke about it, I basically apologized. I'm sorry for feeling this way, or something to the effect of where I was apologetic for feeling the way that I felt. And it took a lot of conversation with the people who are strong in their faith around me, like my youth pastors and people in my church and my family who are strong in their faith. And so, after having these conversations, I realized that it is loving to say the truth. That's what love is. Of course, I think we have to balance truth and grace, and that's something that Christ does so well. He would wash the feet of sinners, but at the end he would say, go and sin no more. And so I think after realizing and kind of understanding this balance of truth and grace, it really helped me. Because, if you're all truth and no grace, then you're kind of just self-righteous. And if you're all grace and no truth, then you're kind of just stupid. So I had to learn that balance. And I find myself praying about it and struggling with it at times, because it's hard, like you said, not to get defensive or not to say what I want to say in a way that isn't Christ-like. But yeah, and certainly, the media, that's been a tough thing to navigate because as I'm sure, several of you can pick up on, mainstream media is pretty biased about certain things, and it's very easy to get labeled as all these different names they'll call you. And I've been called them all, every name under the sun. Specifically, being labeled as anti-trans, which that's not what this is. It's pro-woman, it's pro-reality, it's pro-common sense, it's pro-fairness. It's not anti-anything. I'm standing for something rather than against something. And what I'm standing for is, again, women, and for not just objective truth, but biblical truth, which God lays out very clearly that he created man and woman in his image. So I think to alter that, I don't know, it's helped me with my understanding of what living a Christ-like life really is. So, yeah.
If you could go back to the day before you embraced Leah Thomas and give yourself one sentence of advice, what would it be?
Ooh, this is a good one, and I really don't think I've ever been asked this. Of course, I think everything happened for a reason, and I think that, God puts people in places, but I think if I could go back to the day before Thomas and I competed against each other, I think I probably wouldn't compete. I would tell myself, don't get on the blocks. Because now looking back, and again, I believe it happened for a reason, but I think I was kind of participating in what I would call a farce by going along with it and by getting in the pool. We were just as guilty that day as the people who created these policies and guidelines. And I know that's easier said than done. This was my last meet ever. I didn't want to sacrifice all the work and the time and the hours and the sacrifices that you make. I didn't want to do that. I didn't feel like I should have to. But I think we only really further advanced a lot of these cultural issues that we're seeing when we participate in it. And I didn't always think that, like I said, I didn't think it should be up to the girls. I didn't think girls should have to not compete, especially, at the highest level where you have worked your whole life. I thought coaches should do something. I thought legislation will ultimately be the change that needs to be had. But I realized that process is a very long one, and waiting for people to do the right thing unprovoked, we'll be waiting forever. So I think if I could go back, I would probably not get in the water, to send the message that we as women, at least speaking for myself, I wasn't going to go along with it. So that's probably what I would tell myself.
So last year, our softball team actually did play against a biological male who was on a different team. How do we deal with that?
Yeah, and it's wild. I just saw a boy get a softball scholarship to University of Arizona, which is that's a Pac-10, Pac-12, whatever Pac school. And to have a boy get it totally undermines everything that Title IX was passed to protect and to uphold and to celebrate. So it's hard. Did you guys play here in the state of Missouri?
Kansas. You're in Wichita, Kansas.
I believe that now in both Kansas and Missouri, actually, I think it would be illegal for a male to play in a college sport against girls in both of those states. So a lot of the times, of course, if it's not reported, it just flies under the radar. But in that sense, there is action that could be taken to the fact that it's literally against state law to do that in both of these states. But yeah, it takes you back to what do you do? Do you not compete? Do you forfeit? We've seen several teams do this. There was a team in Vermont, a volleyball team from a Christian school that didn't compete for religious reasons. We've seen a team in California, high school basketball team who didn't compete against a team that had a boy on it. And again, that's a powerful way to say, no, we won't participate in this, but at the same time, is that a decision that you guys should have to make? No. But I think having those conversations internally with your team and your team captains and your coaches and just expressing, hey, this is wrong, This is how we feel about it. And talking to the higher ups and seeing what they can do. You know, if your coach can have a conversation with their coach or something like that. But conversations and civil discourse certainly needs to be had. I think it's something that we're really lacking on as a society and within our culture is just having the conversation. But yeah, it's a tough call. Did you guys win? No. What position was the boy?
I think he was a DH.
Yeah.
For reference, he hit a
Yeah.
100-foot home run off of me.
Okay. I wish I could say I'm surprised, but truly, like, and notice how we all laugh, right? Because it's objectively funny. Like, it's like a Saturday Night Live skit, or like a South Park episode, or like a Babylon Bee headline, but it's real life. And so I think it's natural instinct to just like laugh at it, because it's so, what I would call absurd, that in the way that we've just totally ignored our sex-based protections that are endowed by our laws, our federal laws, Title IX, and they're just being ignored blatantly and explicitly. So yeah, it's heartbreaking, but it continues to happen. Really, I could list example after example after example after example, and it's always males competing in women's sports, and never the other way around.
Mental health is like a big thing for like athletes that they face like problems. So with you being as like successful as you were, did you ever come through like any mental challenging stuff through like being this athlete, and how did you like solve it?
Yeah, certainly before all of this, I think just dealing with COVID was really hard. I was a college athlete. I was into my sophomore year, so March of 2020 was into my sophomore year. It was 3 days before we were supposed to leave for our national championships, which is, again, like the pinnacle of your year. I was set to do very well. I had prepared, and I was like on a roll with my training and my meets and all the different things. And COVID hit. And so our coaches, 3 days before we were supposed to go, they send us all home. And in the sport of swimming, we never got to go home. We didn't get to go home for summer. We didn't get to go home for Christmas. We didn't get to go home for Thanksgiving. We literally got 1 week off in August each year, and that was it. So to be told mid-March, right before your biggest meet, that you had to go home, that took a toll on me. And of course, going home, there were no pools open, and there were no gyms open, and so it was kind of this period of what do we do? Swimming is a sport where, like I said, you just don't get time off. It's very easy to get out of shape as a swimmer because, unfortunately, we don't have like gills and these adaptations to be in the water. So it was a very tough time for me. I struggled with my mental health in that a lot. Just kind of self-worth even. I put a lot of my self-worth in my success as a swimmer. But honestly, I think that time period, looking back, it was really good for me, really, because I began to understand that there's so much more to what success actually looks like as a person within your relationships, as a Christian, as a student, than what you're doing in the pool. So looking back now, I think I'm thankful for that time, but it was really hard. And just, I think, burnout was a very real thing. And I know you all in this room know this, when you're practicing as much as you do, and it consumes all your time, you can't do stuff with your friends or your family. It takes an emotional toll on you. So I learned ways to balance, one thing that I feel like by the end of my junior year and all of my senior year, I got pretty good at is, the 3 hours, 2 hours, I was at each practice every day. I was focused, I was honed in, but as soon as I left the pool, I stopped thinking about swimming. I stopped thinking about, what I did wrong in the practice or what I could have done better or what I did well even. I just didn't want to think about any of it. So that's something that helped me a lot, is kind of being present, not looking back or forward. So that, definitely helped me. And I feel like those skills, they really transcend, like I said, beyond athletics. Now even, like it's pretty easy to dwell on stuff outside of sports, but I found the tactics and skills I developed in coping with that when I was playing swimming, it helps me now too, so yeah. But I will say we had amazing resources too that I utilized in terms of, whether it's academic help that we had provided through our university or whatever it was. I was someone who was always pretty proactive in making sure that everything was on par and good. So if you guys have resources like that, I certainly recommend using them. Yeah.
Did you grow up a Christian?
I did. I definitely did. I am very fortunate for that too. I come from a pretty big family. There's 3 siblings, so 4 of us, 2 parents who love each other, which is such a blessing. Grew up in the church every Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night, which, when you're 12 years old and you're the youngest one in the congregation by like 60 plus years, actually that's probably more like 70 plus years. The amount of visitor cards that I wrote on that were like in the back of the pews is probably ungodly. But really, I think just having that foundation, I have people ask me all the time because of course this issue has become political in a way that it really isn't. Like it's really not a partisan issue, but it's been made one by the media and by our government. And so I have people ask me all the time, have you always been conservative? And it's like, hold on. No, I've always been a Christian, and that more so I would say aligns with conservative values, but I put the kingdom first. That's what I put first before politics or any of that stuff. So yeah, I am very fortunate for that foundation, and without that foundation, I really don't know how people do it in terms of having hope and having faith, and really any adversity you face. I don't know how people do it. Dealing with, whether it be as dealing with death, whatever the adversity is. I think having faith to lean on, it just gives you a sense of serenity that I certainly wouldn't have without my faith. And I think just knowing the battle's already won, ultimately, we already know who wins, who has won, we know that. So I think knowing that, it's just what keeps me grounded and really propagates me to move forward with, a very light heart and a smile on my face. So, yeah.
I think you kind of touched on this a little bit, but I saw in an article that you described transgender women participating in women's sports as spiritual warfare.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate on that a little bit? And then, as Christian women, how do we combat that problem in a biblical, God-honoring way?
Absolutely. I certainly feel not just this battle, but a lot of, again, the issues that we're seeing, whether it's, preying on our most vulnerable of women and children that we're seeing and all of these different issues, it's very clear to me that it's spiritual warfare. And Paul actually warns us several times throughout the Bible in Acts and Romans and different places that we will reach a point where these spiritual battles intensify and that evil will be seen as moral and bitter will be seen as sweet and dark will be seen as light. And I just believe it's undeniable that that's not what we're going through right now as a society. And that's not to say that I think people who identify as trans or who are struggling with gender dysphoria, of course that's not to say I think they're evil, but I certainly believe deception is evil. And I certainly believe that manipulation is evil, and I believe that affirming lies and delusions, that's evil. And that's how Satan moves, is through temptation and through deception. And I think that's a lot of what we're seeing going on around this country. So that's why I say it's spiritual warfare. And I think what we can do as godly women, I think we tend to be submissive, which the Bible, we are to be submissive. We are to submit to our God, and we are to a degree, submit to, our husbands and things like that. So I think there's a lot to be said about a woman who is meek and who is understanding of the biblical role there. But I don't believe that should be interpreted as we should just allow ourselves to be a doormat kind of thing and to be stepped on and smile while we're being stepped on. So I think what we can do as strong biblical women is standing for his truth, standing for objective truth, unapologetically and firmly, in a way that's really unwavering. I think that's, again, just what's lacking, even among pastors, so it seems. It seems as if pastors with a lot of churches and what we're seeing in several different denominations, whether that's the Methodist Church or the Catholic Church, we're seeing kind of this split now. And I think it's because even, our pastors have become weaker and unwilling to lead in a way that could potentially be seen as controversial, which I don't believe this issue, it's really not that controversial. At least it shouldn't be. So again, I think we need to see more leaders for a worldly truth, but more importantly, biblical truth. Yeah.
So speaking in as wide of places as you've done, like state schools and then like a school like this, I know you've kind of faced like some security issues and just people speaking out and just being outrageous. Have you experienced any of that with friends back home, people you thought you aligned with, but then
I was so scared of this because, of course, not all my friends are Christian and not all my friends are conservative. And so my university, before I spoke up, they told me, you'll lose all your friends if you speak up. You'll never get a job. Your employer will look up your name. They'll see you're a transphobe. No one will ever hire you. You'll never get into grad school. You'll lose playing time and your scholarship and different things. And so I was terrified that I would lose my friends who I knew didn't agree with me. But I'll tell you, that hasn't happened, really. At least not people who really know me and really know my heart and really know my intentions, because there are no ill intentions. I have no hatred in my heart. And the people around me close in my life, even if they disagree with me, they knew this about me. So that's been, I think that was a tactic they used to keep us quiet. You'll lose your friends. I really haven't. So that's been a blessing. But yeah, in terms of being here versus other schools, this is the coolest, most awesome thing ever. And I'm so grateful to be here. Yeah, a lot of the state schools and what used to be considered prestigious schools like Harvard, and which now I would argue those are not prestigious. It's been a totally different climate than this. I met with protests and people, spitting on me and these posters, and I mean, even as far as in San Francisco, which I probably could have figured. In San Francisco, I was, totally attacked and punched and hit, and ultimately they held me through the night for ransom, where they demanded, hundreds of protesters, where they demanded that if I wanted to make it home to see my family safely again, I had to pay them money. Which ultimately the dean of students has to show up to the university in the middle of the night to negotiate with them to let me go. And what the dean of students, they all agreed on that I had to pay them $10 each, which I'm like, $10? That's all you guys are gonna bargain for? First of all, I think I'm worth more than $10. Granted, there was a lot of protesters and I certainly don't have that much money in my account, but I'm like, what? So yeah, and then the next day, the university, their vice president of student affairs sent out an email to their entire student body, so staff, students, a university-wide email, and it said, "We are so proud of our brave students for handling Riley Gaines in this manner. We know how deeply traumatic her presence is. Here are some counseling resources, and take the day off of school. We love you guys. We hear you. We see you. Keep it up." Crazy. I'm honestly honored, I guess, that they think I'm that scary. But seriously, the police, they were being held for ransom with me. So I'm looking at the police officers and I'm pretty sure we're being held against our will. And I'm pretty sure we call that kidnapping. So can't you do something? Like, can't you do anything? Like, you have a gun, and I'm not saying you should use it, but like, this is your job. And they're like, no. We actually can't do anything because we'll lose our jobs. We're not allowed to be seen as anything other than an ally to that community, is what they said. So that was a pretty big eye-opener for me, just understanding how this issue and this movement has infiltrated into, of course, we see it in academia, we see it in corporate America and within the media and the government, but I mean, our justice system has been impacted by this adversely, I would say, and so, yeah, that was a big eye-opener for me. But that's unfortunately at these state schools and other places, like, it's not uncommon to be met with that vitriol, which again, I don't really let it bother me. You know, people who comment on my social media or whatever, like, it's most of the time they're either saying, you know, maybe you should have just swam faster, which I'm like, genius, thank you, I never thought of that. Or they'll say something to the effect of, you know, you're transphobic, or say, you know, you're ugly and your hair looks like extensions. And I'm like, this is my real hair, it's not extensions. So just silly things. And once I realized that it really is like name calling, which is what we do in second grade, maybe, it doesn't really hurt my feelings. So, and a lot of the times the profiles that will say these things have no profile picture, or like, I'm just like, yeah, whatever. So I've learned to totally be okay, and honestly use it as encouragement when these kind of negative things happen, like protests, because it shows you how desperate they are to keep you quiet, so people can't hear you, but truthfully, I think that's a sign that you're right over the target. So, yeah. Yes?
When you think back to the day that you had to compete against Thomas, what kind of conversations were you and the other girls having before the event?
So it was super unique because we, of course, on my team at University of Kentucky, I was team captain, and so, you know, we have 40 girls on our team, which is a pretty large team with the swimmers and the divers, and so of the 40, I made sure as captain, I was like, I just want to make sure people know on this team we can talk about this. Like, I'm going to say, you know, create a space where we can. I'm not going to force my opinions on anyone, but everyone should feel comfortable sharing how they feel. And what I found out in doing that is 38 of us, of the 40, felt the exact same way. And it wasn't because we had 38 staunch Republicans swimming for the University of Kentucky. No, we just had 38 girls who didn't want their opportunities taken away, who had worked hard. And so what I found among the swimmers at that meet was the overwhelming majority of us felt the same way, outside of even just my team. And like I said, it was people who I know we don't agree on other things maybe, but we agreed on this issue. But there was a lot of whispering. You know, everyone would, you know, as Thomas walked by, who's 6'4", towered over the rest of us. It was a lot of looking and pointing and whispering, not in a gossipy way, but just like, oh my gosh, like, look, this is wild. A lot of tears were had by these girls who placed either 9th or 17th and missed out on being named an All-American. Of course, the girls who placed second behind him in the 500 freestyle, who missed out on being a national champion. I mean, what an honor that is to be the fastest in the country. A lot of tears that were had, but a lot of girls that were terrified too, terrified to speak how they really felt. A lot of coaches who were terrified. Even still, I have so many coaches who I've respected and known for a really long time who message me and say, keep going, keep pushing, you know, keep taking those arrows, we're all behind you. And I'm like, are you really though? It's great, I'm like honored, but I think again, to continue being silent is complicity. So yeah, that's kind of the feeling that a lot of us got. And I will say one other piece about this championship that was interesting and incredibly telling was that not only did we have Leah Thomas, who again is a male, self-identifying as a woman, competing with the women. We had another trans athlete. But this athlete is a female who identified as a man. We had to go to training to learn how to use she, her pronouns, but also learn how to use he, him pronouns when referring to Izzy, who now goes by Isaac, because we were told we fully had to treat this person as a man. Swam in totally topless, only in a Speedo, as a woman, so that was unique. It's the finals of the 100 freestyle, so top 8 swimmers in the entire country, and you have a 6'4" man in a women's swimsuit next to a woman wearing a Speedo. And I'm like, I'm literally in the Twilight Zone. Like, I'm the crazy one. It's me, it's me, I'm crazy. But that goes to show, like, look, this argument isn't anti-trans. I haven't complained about Izzy, now Isaac, one time, because look, this is a female. You know, what she wants to do in her free time and behind closed doors, you know, as long as it doesn't cost me my taxpayer dollars and, you know, I'm not forced to necessarily support it, then by all means. You know, I think we can only do as much as we can do as Christians in spreading his word, but, you know, by all means. So yeah, that was another piece to this pie that gets left out. And that kind of proves, look, this isn't anti-trans. You know, as long as Izzy, now Isaac, isn't taking performance-enhancing drugs, which are banned. In the NCAA, they have Celsius banned, the energy drinks, because they say it increases your performance levels, but not testosterone. I mean, it's like, what? An energy drink that has 200 milligrams of caffeine? That's wild. So yeah.
What's your key takeaway from the whole Leah situation?
Gosh, I think my key takeaway would probably be if I wanted something done, if I felt a certain way about something, I couldn't expect someone else to step in and do it for me. That's what I really learned. You know, I think we were quick to complain and we were quick to, you know, call out the things that we didn't like, the things that we saw that were, oh my gosh. That's so cool. It's like these protesters at another school. No. We were quick to call out the things we didn't like, but really I realized, you know, you can whine about it all you want, but unless you're willing to do something about it, then it's merely just complaining, and no one wants to be around someone who complains all the time. So that's, I think, my biggest takeaway, and again, that transcends beyond this issue is, if you see an injustice, do something to fix it. Yeah.
So obviously there's a lot of other women that have felt the same way that you have, and even in the same exact meet. Why do you think you're the one who's been the most outspoken?
I think the difference, when I think about this actually, the first time I really learned to stand up for myself to authority figures in college was, so we went home at the end of sophomore year for COVID. We got to come back at the beginning of junior year. And immediately upon coming back, it was people telling us, you know, you had to get a vaccine. You had to do these there was social distancing and contact tracing and mandatory mask, which is the silliest thing in the sport of swimming. Have you ever seen someone swimming wear a mask? No, but they certainly tried. At the time, I'd already had COVID. I thought, you know, your natural antibodies was the best immunity you could have. And so when they were telling me, you know, you have to get this vaccine, I'm like, but do I though? Like, I don't really think I need to. I'm young, I'm healthy, you know, I don't care if anyone else does, but I just don't know if I need to. And they told me it was mandatory. And so I'm thinking to myself, this doesn't seem ethical. It doesn't seem legal. And so I realized after some research and some looking some different things up that mandatory didn't really mean required. It meant strongly suggested, but they couldn't mandate that I had it. So I learned to say no, and I said, I'm not getting it. And they made it miserable. I had to get tested 2 times every week for the rest of my college career. They told me I wasn't going to go to University of Alabama for a meet if I didn't get it. which I said, knowing that I was one of our school's best swimmers and team captain, I said, okay. And of course I got to go to University of Alabama. They tried to say, look, Riley, you're a leader. You're supposed to be leading your team, but you're hurting your team. You're hurting your teammates. And that was hard for me. I never want to hurt my teammates. Like before even, my own personal success, I want the team to succeed. So I really struggled. But again, I stuck with my gut and said no. And I think that prepared me to say no to very similar tactics and very similar methods my senior year. And again, just having the foundation of a strong family unit. There was a lot of support within that wheelhouse of my family. I got married young. I got married at the very end of college, and so I think that was a blessing too. And also my faith, yeah. Those things I think were unique to a degree from the rest of us. So I think those are the things that kind of set me apart. Yeah.
What kind of motivates you to keep going to speak in these schools? Because I'm sure this isn't what you envisioned.
No.
For your life.
It's not what I envisioned. I was actually set to be in dental school after college. I put my deposit down, accepted my seat. I was ready to go to dental school, be a dentist, actually be an endodontist is what I was going to specialize in, which is root canals, weirdly enough. So by no means did I think I would be doing this. I never would have thought it would be necessary and urgent, I might add, to do this. But really what has encouraged me a ton is going to these colleges. I think there's a large need for Gen Zers to step up and to realize like this is our future. These old politicians and old men I was talking about earlier, they're probably going to die within like the next 5 years. They're so old. This is like our future we have to worry about. But what encourages me is even in the pits of San Francisco and these other state colleges, there are so many people who show up and show out who are like desperate to hear the truth. They're hungry for the truth. And that inspires me. That really does. And that's what I said to you guys. Like, it is so revitalizing to be in this room. And it's easy to get down on yourself and feel like there's little to no hope. And, what can we do? I'm only one person. But when I see a room like this, like, I'm just overjoyed. And it, like, really, I feel like recharged. And it's like, this is why we fight. So, yeah, there are certainly struggles to it. The travel, the emotional toll, but it's worth it. It really is. So, yeah. Yeah.
What do you see the future of sports looking like? Women's sports, what do you
Yeah.
want out of that?
Well, what we're seeing now, which we wouldn't have seen a year ago, which is good news. What we're seeing now, when a instance like this happens, like for example, just a few weeks ago, there is a golfer by the name of Haley Davidson, who's a male, who's competing for a spot at the LPGA Tour, which of course is the pinnacle of golf. And so now what we're seeing is the public outraged by this and putting pressure on the LPGA and these different tours and different things that contribute to this. And they're revising their policies because of the pressure. So that's been hopeful. USA Boxing just released their new guidelines, which say that a man can get in the ring and just beat up women and get money for it. So that's USA Boxing's new guidelines. But there's a lot of pressure. Even just this week, Rip Curl, which is the big surfing brand, they dropped Bethany Hamilton, who is, of course, the girl from Soul Surfer who lost her arm in a shark attack in the early 2000s. But was a professional surfer. She came out and said, I'm not going, because World Surf League created their new guidelines that would allow men to surf against women, and Bethany Hamilton said, look, I'm done competing in this league until they revise their policy. And so Rip Curl was Bethany Hamilton's sponsor, and they dropped her because of her stance. And then they chose to bring on a male who identified as a woman as their next woman's ambassador, kind of as slap to Bethany Hamilton's face. They said, fine, we don't need you. Now there are so many people boycotting Rip Curl. They've lost millions of dollars from their stakeholders are pulling out. It's unfortunate it has to get to that point, but there's a lot of, I think it has to sometimes for people to wake up and the tide to turn. And I certainly think the tide is turning. Parents are waking up, female athletes are waking up, coaches are waking up. So I think we are on the path to restoring sanity. I think it's inevitable that truth prevails. It always does. It's kind of just a matter of how long and when. So I think we're on the path there. I think it just takes unfortunate circumstances. But the Olympics, it's an Olympic year. Their policies and their guidelines, it word for word says that you can't presume a male possesses any advantage over females. The words they use, they say that is unverified, alleged, and perceived. And until you can prove that men are advantageous over women in sports or anything that requires sheer strength or athleticism, then you can't discriminate anyone, and anyone can compete wherever they want. So you also have big governing bodies like the Olympics who are failing women and female athletes, and really just the integrity of sport as a whole. So, but I think we're restoring. Yeah.
So you did swim against Leah Thomas, correct?
Yeah.
And
So
then you tied.
yeah.
So going against Leah Thomas, did you have any idea of defeat, or that you thought it was impossible?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely did, because when we competed against each other, it was the day after he won the 500 freestyle, the national title, and I'm not talking just won, I'm talking dominated. And so it was kind of this feeling of just going into it with your hands totally tied behind your back. I knew that I was going to do the best that I could do, and I really focused on doing it for my team and getting points for my team. But at the same time, it was a feeling of defeat, and a feeling of curiosity. Admittedly, it was kind of like a circus. We were all like, "What's going to happen?" It was we were so curious, intrigued, which I kind of ashamedly admit now, looking back, that there was even this remote sense of curiosity. But we ended up tying. Meaning, of course, we went the exact same time, down to the 100th of a second, which is pretty rare, when you're racing for a minute and 40 seconds and not even 1/100th separated us. But really what thrusted me over the edge is we get out of the water and we go behind the awards podium where, typically the top 8 swimmers are marched out and you're named an All-American and you get your little $5 production trophy, and we're back there. And the NCAA official looks at both Thomas and myself. Again, Thomas, who's towering over me at a whopping 6'4". And this official says, "Great job, you two, but you tied. And we only have one trophy, so we're going to give the trophy to Leah. Sorry, Riley, you don't get one." And in this moment, my heart rate was still high after racing. My adrenaline was still pumping, and so the first thing I thought ended up being the first thing that I said. But I looked at this official and I said, "What do you mean? Isn't this everything that Title IX was passed to prevent from happening? This is the women's 200 freestyle. Why are you adamant on making sure that the man has the trophy?" He didn't really know what to say at first. No one really gave him a script of what to say. And so his first excuse was, "Oh, well, we're just doing this in chronological order." So I was like, "Do you mean alphabetical? Because G literally comes before T. Otherwise, I'm not too sure what you're being chronological about." And that's when he admitted, he said, and I could tell he didn't even believe what he was saying. His face looked sad, his voice changed, and he said, "Riley, I'm so sorry, but we've been advised by the NCAA that when photos are being taken, it's crucial that the trophy's in Leah's hands." And that's when I was like, that's what this is? It's a photo op. They just reduced all of this, everything we'd worked our entire lives for, down to a photo op to validate, the feelings and the identity of a man at the expense of our own. So that's really what thrusted me over the edge. And like I said, I was waiting for someone else to do something. And in that moment is when it first hit me, like how could we expect someone to stand up for us if we weren't even willing to stand up for us? So yeah, that's the short of it. But yeah, Thomas was very, I mean, he didn't talk to anyone. He didn't say any words during all this when I'm like screaming at this official. I tell it very mildly, but really I'm like screaming at this official. I'm like, you're gonna give the trophy to a man in the women's 200 freestyle. Thomas didn't say anything. And look, like Thomas was actually following the rules that were in place, and so ultimately it's the rules I have a problem with. But I could sense a sheer sense of entitlement and disregard for the rest of us from Thomas, yeah. Yeah?
Did you ever get to talk to Thomas after that?
Not really. Both of the athletes that I was talking about, the trans athletes, they stuck together pretty close and kind of excluded themselves from the rest of the swimmers at the meet. And they both wrote on their arms in black Sharpie, big letters, "Let trans kids play," as if they both weren't playing in the category that they wanted to play in. But yeah, they stuck together and didn't talk to the rest of us. But after this, FINA, which is like the World Aquatics, it's like the governing body of swimming internationally, they changed their policy and they said, look, if you've gone through male puberty, you can't compete with women, which would prevent Thomas from going to the Olympics and vying for an Olympic spot, which he was hoping to do. And just this past week, he's announced he's suing to hopefully get a spot on the women's Olympic team still, which is wild. But I don't think that will uphold. I don't think he would win that case. But anyways, I'm just so gracious and grateful for you guys and this amazing university. This is so cool. Just to have, a group of students and staff who are supportive of each other and supportive of spreading God's word and understanding God's word and his mission for us. So it's really amazing. And I'm mad I didn't go here. Maybe if y'all had a swim team.